How do you successfully manage to transport £226.6 billion of a highly volatile, biologically active, and rapidly decomposing fluid across an entire continent every single year without accidentally triggering a catastrophic public health crisis? This is Critical Path, where we explore stories and innovations about our global supply chain that connect our world to your everyday life. Imagine, if you will, that you are the supreme architect of a sprawling logistics network. But this isn't just any normal logistics network where you are moving neatly stacked boxes of sneakers or flat-screen televisions. No, your inventory is produced by 9.4 million individual manufacturing units that are entirely biological. These manufacturing units, which we conventionally call dairy cows, do not have an off switch. They do not care about human holidays, they do not care about the weekend, and they certainly do not care if a global pandemic has completely shuttered every restaurant and school in the country. Furthermore, they absolutely do not care if a massive blizzard has just buried the interstate in 6 feet of solid snow. These units must be emptied at least twice every single day, without fail, or the entire system completely collapses. If your logistical masterpiece fails for more than 48 hours, your product doesn't just sit quietly on a warehouse shelf gathering dust. Instead, it rapidly transforms into a literal public health hazard, triggers a localized financial apocalypse for 50,000 family farms, and results in a horrific mess that forces people to dump millions of gallons of literal white gold directly into manure pits. Welcome to the 48-hour doomsday clock. Welcome to the daily, chaotic, beautiful reality of the national milk route. It is a system so incredibly efficient that it has become completely invisible to the average consumer pouring a bowl of cereal, yet so mind-bogglingly fragile that it operates on the absolute bleeding edge of a mathematical precipice every single morning. To truly understand this invisible logistics grid, we have to start with the fundamental problem, which is basically a three-way, high-speed collision between biology, physics, and extremely advanced mathematics. Let us talk about the biological tyranny of the constant tap. A dairy cow is, for all intents and purposes, a biological faucet that is permanently superglued in the on position. Unlike a normal factory that makes plastic widgets or car parts, a dairy farm cannot simply throttle down its production when demand gets a little soft. A cow that is not milked precisely on her rigorous schedule faces severe, immediate health risks, including a painful condition called mastitis, and will eventually just stop producing milk altogether. And if she stops, getting her to start again is an outcome that takes months or even years to reverse. This biological reality creates what industry insiders call a push supply chain, and it is a push supply chain of unparalleled, terrifying intensity. Most normal logistics models in the world focus on pull dynamics. In a pull system, demand signals from the customer trigger production. You want a custom graphic tee, you order it, and the factory makes it. But the dairy industry is a relentless push system. The product is coming. It is arriving, whether the world is ready for it, whether the world wants it, or whether the world is currently on lockdown. This constant pressure forces the entire American dairy industry into a state of permanent, high-anxiety motion. United States milk production has exploded, increasing by 96% since 1975, even as the actual number of cows has fluctuated over the years. The raw efficiency of the modern dairy cow is frankly staggering. If you took the annual United States milk production and forced it to flow over Niagara Falls, it would take 10 solid hours for all that milk to pass over the edge. Managing this apocalyptic volume requires an intricate network of 2,000 specialized haulers and 500 processing plants that have to operate in absolute, perfect synchronicity. And then, there is the temperature problem. Milk emerges from the cow at a cozy 38 degrees Celsius, which is roughly 101 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, 38 degrees Celsius happens to be a temperature that microorganisms find absolutely delightful. For them, it is a Club Med vacation. It is the perfect environment for rapid, unchecked colonization. To prevent a terrifying national outbreak of Listeria or Salmonella, this warm fluid must be violently plunged to 4 degrees Celsius or 40 degrees Fahrenheit or lower within mere hours. It must then be kept at that precise, chilly temperature throughout a journey that averages 315 miles from the farm's udder to your local grocery store. This is not merely a delivery system we are talking about here. This is a high-speed, temperature-controlled hydraulic buffer that perfectly manages over 4 million loads of milk annually, with a margin of error that is functionally zero. The cold chain officially begins the precise second the milk leaves the cow. Immediately after the milking process, the fluid is rapidly channeled into massive, refrigerated bulk tanks right there on the farm. These humming tanks are the first crucial line of defense against bacterial ruin, serving as the absolute initial storage node in the logistics grid. If the rural electricity fails, or if the cooling system so much as stutters, a terrifying clock starts ticking down toward a total financial loss. In developing regions around the world, the lack of this very specific, localized refrigeration infrastructure leads to massive, heartbreaking spoilage, proving once and for all that the milk route is just as much about high-tech refrigeration as it is about putting trucks on a highway. Now, to fully appreciate how wild this is, we have to look back at the history and the evolution of the milk run. How did we get from horse-drawn carts to lean logistics? The term milk run is thrown around in modern corporate boardrooms to describe basically any efficient, multi-stop delivery route. But its origins are deeply, beautifully literal, and rooted in the absolute desperation of the early 20th century. Back in 1917, out in the American upper Midwest, the original milk run was actually a highly specialized train. This train made frequent, rapid-fire stops at tiny farms to pick up heavy, sloshing metal milk cans. These cans were uninsulated and incredibly heavy, which meant the train had to run regular like clockwork to ensure the milk actually reached the local creamery before the hot sun turned it into a deeply unpleasant science experiment. By the time World War II rolled around, this concept had rapidly evolved into a brilliant circular delivery method. The iconic milkmen would drive a set, rigid route, dropping off full glass bottles of milk and, crucially, picking up the empty glass bottles for return and rigorous sterilization. This concept of circularity is the very DNA of the modern milk run. Think about a traditional, boring logistics model. A massive warehouse might receive 5 completely separate trucks from 5 completely separate suppliers, which inevitably leads to terrible traffic congestion and what the industry calls less than truckload waste. But in a true milk run model, a single, highly optimized truck follows a closed loop. It picks up small, incremental loads from multiple clustered suppliers, combining them, and then returning to the main processing facility with one completely full tank. This model is so breathtakingly efficient that the global manufacturing world eventually just stole it outright. Corporate giants like Amazon and Toyota actively use their own versions of milk runs to smoothly move parts between assembly stations or to collect necessary components from closely clustered suppliers. However, there is a massive difference here. While your friendly neighborhood Amazon driver is moving inanimate, completely dead boxes containing books and phone chargers, the dairy driver is moving a living, breathing, thermal-sensitive, highly perishable cargo. The stakes of the modern dairy milk run are utterly unique because the charming empty glass bottle of the 1940s has been aggressively replaced by the intense clean-in-place sanitation cycle of the modern stainless steel tanker. So if the unyielding biological pressure of the cow is the massive engine powering the milk route, what is the steering wheel? The steering wheel is a deeply complex branch of mathematics known as operations research. Every single morning, long before you are awake, dairy dispatchers face a terrifying mathematical challenge known to panicked computer scientists worldwide as the traveling salesman problem, or the vehicle routing problem. The traveling salesman problem asks a seemingly innocent question. Given a list of dairy farms and the exact distances between every single one of them, what is the shortest possible route that visits each farm exactly one time and then returns to the starting point? Now, on the surface, this sounds like a fun little puzzle a 5th grader could solve with a crayon on a placemat. But it is actually one of the most notoriously difficult, brain-melting problems in all of mathematics. It is classified as NP-hard. What that means in plain English is that as you add more farms to a driver's route, the total number of possible driving sequences does not just grow, it explodes exponentially. Let us do some math, and please stay with me, I promise this gets wild. A route with just 20 farm stops has 20 factorial possible combinations. To put 20 factorial into perspective, that is roughly 2.4 quintillion different ways to drive the truck. Or, if you prefer scientific notation, 2.4 times 10 to the 18th power. If you had a supercomputer that could magically check 1 billion different routes every single second, it would still take that computer over 70 solid years to find the absolute mathematically perfect path for a single measly 20-stop truck route. Obviously, the raw milk cannot wait 70 years in the back of a truck, so logistics planners are forced to use heuristic algorithms. Heuristics are basically incredibly smart mathematical shortcuts that find a good enough solution in mere seconds, saving us all from a milky doom. There are 3 main pillars to this frantic dairy math. First, you have nearest neighbor. This is often called the greedy approach. The driver simply starts at the plant and always drives to the closest unvisited farm on the map. It is super fast and requires zero brainpower, but it often disastrously results in a massive long-haul home from the final, most distant stop. That long-haul home can actually make the entire route 25% longer than the truly optimal route. Second, you have the branch and bound algorithm. This beautiful piece of math starts with a solid initial guess and then systematically analyzes the variations. If a particular branch of stops is mathematically proven by the computer to be longer than the current best route, the computer completely discards that entire branch instantly, saving massive amounts of precious processing power. But the third pillar is where the true chaos lies: time windows. In the intense world of dairy, a stop is not just a physical location on a map. It is a specific, non-negotiable moment in time. Different farms milk their herds at completely different times of day, and the dairy tanker must arrive exactly after the fresh milk is thoroughly cooled, but crucially, before the next scheduled milking begins, just to free up physical space in the farm's bulk tank. This strict temporal dimension twists the math into knots, turning a simple two-dimensional map problem into a terrifying four-dimensional spacetime puzzle. Once the supercomputers have somehow determined the route, the physical, terrifying reality of the liquid cargo takes over. Welcome to the physics of the smoothbore tanker, also known as chaos in a can. A modern milk tanker is a gigantic, 6,000-gallon stainless steel cylinder that is a complete and absolute nightmare to drive. Most transport tankers on the highway that carry hazardous chemicals or sloshing gasoline have internal structures called baffles. Baffles are internal walls with holes in them that prevent the liquid cargo from moving too violently when the truck stops or turns. But milk tankers are completely smoothbore. This means the entire interior of the trailer is just one long, uninterrupted, massive tube. Why on earth would anyone design a truck this way? Sanitation. Baffles have pesky corners, sharp edges, and rough weld points where sticky milk proteins and fats can secretly accumulate. If they accumulate, they create horrific biofilms that harbor dangerous bacteria. A smoothbore tank, on the other hand, can be aggressively cleaned by high-pressure, violently rotating spray balls that the industry affectionately calls firesticks. These firesticks ensure the interior is so perfectly sterile that a brain surgeon could literally eat a sandwich off the floor of the tank. But the terrible price of this surgical cleanliness is physical, white-knuckle instability. When a milk tanker is only half full, the roughly 20 tons of liquid milk inside can slosh the entire, uninterrupted length of the tank. If a driver is forced to slam on the brakes to avoid a deer, the 20 tons of milk absolutely does not care that the brakes are locked. It continues to violently move forward, creating a massive, terrifying wave of pure kinetic energy. This slosh can literally push a completely stopped truck 5 feet forward across the pavement, or brutally tip a vehicle right over during a sharp highway turn. This is exactly why milk haulers are a rare and highly specialized breed of driver. They are essentially forced to surf 40,000 pounds of angry liquid through winding rural backroads every single day. Assuming the driver survives the spacetime math and the sloshing physics, the tanker finally arrives at the processing plant. But the journey is not over. It must enter the intake zone, which is arguably the most critical and tense checkpoint in our entire food safety system. Before a single, solitary drop of that milk is allowed to be unloaded into the plant's massive silos, it must pass a rigorous smell test and a gauntlet of high-stakes chemical assays. The primary, terrifying fear here is antibiotic residue. Imagine a scenario. If a single sick cow on a single tiny farm was treated with standard penicillin and her milk accidentally slipped into the farm's bulk tank, that tiny bit of residue can completely contaminate the entire 6,000-gallon tanker. But it gets worse. If that contaminated tanker is accidentally pumped into the processing plant's colossal 50,000-gallon silo, it can financially ruin the entire day's production for the whole facility. Because of this, the plant initiates the absolute protocol of rejection. First comes the beta-lactam test. Technicians deploy rapid strip tests with names like the CHARM SL or the SNAP test to eagerly detect even a few microscopic parts per billion of antibiotics. This agonizing wait takes about 8 to 15 minutes. If that little strip shows a positive result, the tanker immediately goes into a state of presumptive positive quarantine. A secondary, far more sensitive chemical test is performed just to confirm the terrible news. If confirmed, the traceback begins. You see, every single truck driver is required to take a tiny vial sample from each individual farm's bulk tank before they pump the milk. If the massive tanker fails the plant test, technicians frantically test these little vials one by one to find the exact violative farm. Once the failure is absolutely confirmed, the tanker is flat out rejected. The milk must be ceremoniously dumped, and the violating farmer who accidentally let the penicillin slip is usually billed for the entire cost of the tanker. This is a devastating financial hit that can easily exceed $15,000 in a single, catastrophic afternoon. The intake process across the country is both wondrous and terrifying in its chaotic variety. Different plants use wildly different agitation techniques, sampling layouts, and pumping speeds, leading to massive, glaring discrepancies in efficiency. The absolute best plants can process a truckload of milk for roughly one-third the cost of the worst plants. This wild variance leads to over $100 million in mind-blowing industry-wide waste every single year, just from trucks waiting in line to be chemically tested. But right when you think this whole system is just too fragile, right when you think one bad snowstorm will cause a nationwide dairy collapse, we hit the glorious aha revelation. The secret, completely counterintuitive twist that prevents a national dairy shortage is this: milk is a reversible chemical equation. Most people mistakenly believe that once milk is produced by the cow, it must be rapidly consumed as fluid, liquid milk. But the secret, beautiful mechanism that actually balances the entire massive United States dairy market is our high-tech ability to deconstruct milk into its fundamental chemical Legos and literally snap them back together later. Welcome to the wild, magical world of reconstitution. Every year, during what the industry calls the spring flush, which runs roughly from April to June, the cows produce an absolutely enormous surplus of milk. The weather is great, the grazing conditions are fantastic, and the cows go into overdrive. But human demand for drinking milk doesn't magically increase just because it's spring. So what happens to all this extra liquid? The logistics system desperately diverts this massive surplus away from bottling plants and towards specialized balancing plants. These balancing plants use intense evaporation and incredible spray drying technologies to instantly turn liquid milk into skim milk powder or whole milk powder. The true magic happens when you realize that this dry powder isn't just destined for overseas export or commercial baking. It is the literal strategic reserve of the dairy world. When a specific region of the country faces a lean season, or when a massive natural disaster suddenly cuts off the fresh liquid supply, the industry breaks out the heavy machinery. They use high-speed induction mixers with deeply cool, sci-fi names like the Vacucam EJM 2000 to aggressively combine the stored milk powder, heavy butterfat, and regular water back into liquid milk. This recombined product is nutritionally identical to fresh milk. It is a miraculous logistical trick that allows the national milk supply to remain perfectly, beautifully flat and stable, even when actual cow production is wildly, chaotically seasonal. By stripping out 87% of the water weight, they create a product with extremely low water activity that prevents microbial growth for 12 to 24 months, severely reducing shipping costs and stabilizing prices across the board. Speaking of stabilizing prices, we have to talk about the system that keeps the money flowing. To keep this frenetic milk route moving without farmers going totally bankrupt, the government and dairy cooperatives use a brilliant system of economic hydrostatics known formally as Federal Milk Marketing Orders, or FMMO for short. In any normal commodity market, if you have absolutely no buyer for your product today, your product's value instantly drops to zero. But milk is far too critical to human nutrition for that kind of wild rollercoaster volatility. The Federal Milk Marketing Order System cleverly creates what is called a market-wide pool. All the revenue generated from all the milk sold in a specific region, whether it happens to be high-value drinking milk in a plastic jug or low-value milk powder in a 50-pound sack, is metaphorically thrown into one giant bucket. Then, every single farmer gets paid a blended price, or a statistical uniform price, based strictly on their total volume, completely regardless of whose exact milk actually ended up in the fancy glass bottle. This pooling system absolutely prevents what economists call disorderly marketing. Without pooling, desperate farmers would relentlessly fight to secure lucrative contracts with fluid milk bottling plants, often being forced into agreeing to illegal, back-alley concessions just to keep their precious milk from being downgraded and turned into low-value powder. Pooling magically ensures that the farmer located 300 miles away out in the sticks is just as financially stable as the farmer located only 10 miles away from the city center, maintaining a robust, geographically diverse grid of supply that can withstand severe local shocks. In fact, this pooling system was put to the ultimate, terrifying pressure test during the lockdowns of 2020. When public schools, which happen to be the largest bulk buyers of milk in the country, closed literally overnight, there was a massive, unprecedented surplus of milk, with absolutely no place to go. Desperate farmers were forced to open the valves and literally dump raw milk. But because the United States Department of Agriculture heroically allowed that dumped milk to remain part of the economic pool, the crushing financial loss was shared equitably across the entire industry. It acted as an invisible safety net that prevented individual farming families from facing total bankruptcy, and keeping those families afloat is exactly what ultimately keeps your grocery store shelves fully stocked today. But beyond the intense mathematics, the sloshing physics, the spray-drying chemistry, and the economic pooling, there is the vital human factor. Behind the fire sticks and the supercomputers are the incredibly hard-working people who actually run the physical route in the dead of night. A milk hauler isn't just an average steering wheel holder. Legally, they are a state-licensed milk and cream grader. They are the ultimate, frontline arbiters of quality and public health. Let's look at a typical, brutal day for a driver like Patrick, who runs routes up in Minnesota. His day usually begins at 6:30 in the morning, though in some hyper-competitive regions, drivers start as incredibly early as 3 in the morning, a time universally known in the industry as "dark early." Patrick will visit up to 9 different dairies in a grueling 12 to 17-hour shift. The job is described as socialistic in its rigid, uncompromising structure. The precise route is heartlessly dictated by a computer algorithm, and the exact sequence of farm stops must be followed like absolute clockwork. The driver's daily life is a continuous loop of short, incredibly intense rituals. First comes the approach, which involves delicately navigating a 20-ton smoothbore tanker down a bumpy, narrow gravel driveway that was only ever meant for a tractor. Then comes the greeting. Often, the driver's only social interaction for hours is playing with the farm cats, tiny kittens, eager puppies, and newborn calves that roam the property. Next is the measurement. The driver must use a simple dipstick or a highly accurate digital scale to determine the exact, perfect weight of the milk in the tank. Because that single number literally dictates the size of the farmer's paycheck. Then comes the critical sampling. They must vigorously agitate the milk to ensure the rich cream is perfectly dispersed, and then carefully take that one, tiny, crucial vial of milk that will later face the terrifying antibiotic lab tests at the plant. Finally, the pump. The driver stands in the dark, listening to the loud rhythmic hum of the machine as 35,000 pounds of raw milk is rapidly transferred from the farm to the insulated truck. These drivers often develop incredibly deep, meaningful bonds with the specific farms they visit every single day. They play fetch with the farm dogs while the loud milk pump chatters away, and they quietly witness the beautiful circle of life as barn kittens are born and dairy calves are raised. Yet, despite these charming moments, the job is undeniably grueling. They work 365 days a year, in rain, sleet, or snow, because, as one weary driver perfectly noted, the cows have completely refused to take the weekends off. They navigate weigh stations they call chicken coops, and drive their smoothbore milk bottles through the night to keep the system alive. If you really want to see the absolute futuristic peak of this logistical evolution, you have to look at California. California alone produces a staggering 18% of all the milk in the United States, and its hyper-advanced dairy industry is an economic juggernaut worth an estimated $87.5 billion in total sales. California's logistical setup is a masterclass in what experts call density efficiency. In just a handful of counties like Fresno, Tulare, Kings, and Madera, the sheer value of the milk produced easily exceeds $4 billion annually. Because these modern dairies are so massive and physically located so incredibly close to the massive processing plants, often within just 100 miles of the major global shipping ports of Oakland or Los Angeles, California milk is uniquely positioned to dominate both fresh domestic delivery and the highly competitive global export market. The absolute sci-fi future of the milk route is currently alive and operating out in Bakersfield, at the Valley Natural Beverages facility. This mind-blowing $200 million processing plant utilizes advanced steam infusion ultra-high temperature technology, or UHT, to create milk that still tastes incredibly fresh but can magically last for months on a shelf without any refrigeration whatsoever. Furthermore, their massive warehouse is fully automated. It is quite literally a lights-out facility, meaning there are 0 humans inside. Giant, terrifyingly fast robotic cranes effortlessly move massive pallets of milk around in total, pitch-black darkness. This incredible level of automation drastically reduces truck dwell times and completely eliminates intake waste, actively solving the massive $100 million delay problem that plagues older, human-run facilities across the country. But even with robots in the dark, the modern milk route faces terrifying new challenges. As global climate change aggressively intensifies, the intricate dairy network must constantly face the absolute nightmare of freight forwarding: massive California wildfires. A single, uncontrolled fire can completely shut down major arteries like Interstate 405 or the iconic Pacific Coast Highway, leaving full tankers hopelessly stranded and farm cows dangerously overfilling their bulk tanks with nowhere to send the milk. In response to this fiery chaos, the dairy industry isn't just giving up. They are adopting cutting-edge technology like digital twins and advanced artificial intelligence predictive models. These incredible computer systems allow logistics managers to actively anticipate the exact impacts of a spreading wildfire, seamlessly rerouting milk tankers across the state before the local police have even officially closed the roads. If a critical fuel pipeline, like the Kinder Morgan pipeline, is suddenly shut down due to intense fire activity, the artificial intelligence can instantly recalculate the entire regional milk grid's exact diesel fuel needs, ensuring that the heavy smoothbore tankers keep rolling down the highway even when the power grid totally collapses. So what have we learned about the national milk route? It is a stunning masterpiece of invisible logistics. It is a highly stressed system that somehow solves the impossible problem of biological tyranny every 48 hours without fail. By forcefully combining the relentless, unyielding pressure of bovine milk production with the high-stakes, mind-bending mathematics of the traveling salesman problem, the industry has successfully created a giant hydraulic buffer that literally balances the entire nation's nutrition on a microscopic knife's edge. We have explored the wild core mechanisms of this invisible grid. We have seen the terrifying smoothbore tankers that willingly sacrifice physical driving stability to achieve surgical, flawless cleanliness. We have marveled at the economic hydrostatics of the pooling system that gracefully protects small farming families from devastating commodity market shocks. And we have celebrated the certified human graders who drink bad diner coffee at 3 a.m. to act as our absolute frontline defense for public health. But the truest, most mind-expanding aha moment remains the literal alchemical secret of reconstitution. The profound realization that everyday milk is actually a reversible commodity, a microscopic Lego set of proteins, water and fats that can be violently deconstructed into powder, stored in a warehouse for a year, and then seamlessly rebuilt with a giant blender, is what truly prevents a catastrophic national shortage. It wonderfully transforms milk from a ticking biological time bomb into a remarkably stable, national safety grid that can successfully weather viral pandemics, raging wildfires, and the paralyzing curse of mathematical choice that plagues manual truck route planning. The next time you groggily reach into the fridge for a simple carton of milk in the dead middle of a winter blizzard or a scorching summer heatwave, I want you to stop and remember the dark early driver. Remember them desperately navigating a 20-ton, violently sloshing liquid pendulum through a 4-dimensional space-time Sudoku puzzle just to get to a farm. They are the true, beating heartbeat of the liquid clockwork, ensuring that the biological tap never stops running and the white gold always arrives perfectly chilled, rigorously tested, and exactly on time. The milk route doesn't just deliver your breakfast, it vigorously maintains the incredibly fragile balance between modern human civilization and relentless biological necessity, one terrifying smoothbore loop at a time. If you were put in charge of the global milk supply chain for a day, what wild, totally unregulated change would you make to fix the system, and how quickly do you think you would accidentally cause a national crisis? Let us know your brilliant and terrible ideas in the comments below. Thanks for listening and watching. Please like and subscribe, and make sure to check out our other videos about the global supply chain.